All right, hello and welcome to this build guide for the Shadow Daggers Bladedancer. This is one of the fastest builds in the game, easily, and also one of my favorites, top 2 all time, and very likely going to be my patch starter build. So I will be playing this on stream a lot, at least in the beginning of the patch, to build up the wealth that I need, all the gear that I want, so on and so forth. It's just so good. In fact, this build doesn't really have any weaknesses. It's got really good tankiness, even with changes to Wings of Argentus and Throne of Ambition. It's still really, really good at that. Very, very good damage, amazing movement, just a ton of tools to work with. It's an incredible build, and I really love it if you haven't been able to figure that out yet. So let's get into a little bit of what makes this build so good, and why I'd want to start with it. So to start with, the shift is incredible as a movement ability, and this will actually let you go faster with shift because we're going to use a smoke weaver. In fact, we can use 2 smoke weavers, which I'll probably do for a lot of the time, if not all of the time, depending on whether or not I use Bastion. So it's going to allow us to move at like 150% move speed most of the time, just super fast. It's got a ton of ways to proc Shadow Daggers. Shadow Daggers is it's actually technically an ailment that procs a sub skill once you get 4 of the ailments on the enemy, and that sub skill has a guaranteed crit on it, and we can scale it really high through Fizz penetration with Shadow Daggers, which is a rogue specific affix, so we can just get a lot of damage on that. We can also scale the added damage very easily through both melee and throwing because it has both of those tags on it. There's just a lot of ways to scale up that damage, and then there's a lot of ways to proc it through Umbral Blades, through Shadow Cascade, through Sync Strike. It's just going to have a ton of procs, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch all of the crits fly and watch things just get deleted from existence. So yeah, we're going to have a big toolkit, and we're going to be able to use a number of uniques with this. Smoke Weaver is huge for it. Wings of Argentus provides us with a lot of damage reduction, even in its nerfed form. Bastion of Honor also got a nerf, but still probably going to be best in slot for this build, depending on how large that area is, which we'll talk about that more in the gearing section. And Siphon of Anguish is also great for this build. So it's a build that loves gear but doesn't need gear. It will start off strong and just get stronger, and you can just fly through echoes faster than just about anything, if not anything else in the game. All right, let's talk about the pros and cons. It's actually quite tanky. About 100k EHP is not out of reach. In fact, you can go higher than that if you're shooting for best in slot. It's average. Exceptionally fast, truly one of the fastest builds in the game, if not the fastest. Very good damage, both single target and clear, and it doesn't struggle with any of the content really. Like compared to other builds, it's very strong in all 3 aspects of the game. Although Arena, it's not the best pusher because it is a more of a melee build. But when you talking about dungeons, talking about monolith, it's going to just do an excellent job in both of those. As far as cons go, it can feel a bit out of control if you're not used to it, because you are literally jumping in and jumping out, jumping in and jumping out, going extremely fast, trying to stay moving the entire time, because if you stop moving, you will take more damage. So for players who aren't used to a really, really fast play style with a lot of like intentional button pushes that are going to make you move even more, you can feel out of control, at least at first. It does have some mana management. It's handled mostly through gearing, but also through good use of shift and sync strike at the right times, and taking short breaks if needed, although you don't usually need to do that, but there is a little bit of that in there. It is very vulnerable when not moving. You lose a lot of your HP, in fact most of your HP, if you're not moving, so you do want to stay moving pretty much all the time, as long as there are enemies around. And maxing the build does require uniques, which can be seen as a negative because you have to go and farm those, but they're not especially hard to get outside of Bastion of Honor, which isn't actually necessary for the build. It's just a little bit of a icing on the cake as far as getting its EHP even further up there. All right, now that we've talked about the pros and cons, let's move on to the skills and the passives. So we have Umbral Blades, which is one of the easiest ways of applying Shadow Daggers, and we're actually going to apply it through shift. We're not going to directly use it at all. We're not going to actually have it as a skill that we're going to cast at any time, and it's going to effectively just be dropped behind us, and it's going to chase down enemies. It doesn't do it in the video here, but it will have done it in the video of the gameplay, so you can see that it's just going to follow enemies and just makes it easier for it to hit them. Umbral Blades, some people will tell you got a nerf this patch. I actually think it got a buff, because of a number of different interactions that happened. It doesn't shotgun anymore, but it does apply faster and more consistently than it used to, because of some bugs that were in the code were causing not all of the Shadow Dagger procs to actually occur, but now they do, so I don't think it was actually nerfed at all. Next up, we've got Synchronized Strike. Actually, let me really quickly cover just what how we're going to do, how Umbral Blades works, because it's probably important for you to know that. So we need to actually take Lethal Darkness so that we get Shadow Dagger procs off of it. We're going to need to take Cacophony of Steel, which is going to cause it to spin in place. And then the homing part is from Loathing. We also want to take well, actually Precision Cuts isn't super necessary, but you can take this if you want to auto throw it. But what we really need is Umbral Remnant, where shadows will drop Umbral Blades. This is going to cause Shift to actually drop an Umbral Blade from a shadow we're creating there. It's also going to cause Sync Strike to do it, so we're always going to have plenty of Umbral Blades up, even though they don't shotgun. It's really good to be consistently having them up, plus they will help with clear because they're going to be kind of all over the map. We also are going to take Sub-Zero Intrusion to get to Cold Snap Strike, which is just for the chill chance, which may not seem that big of a deal, but in this particular build it's a great thing because it allows us to not gear chill anywhere else. In fact, I'm going to change this out, so Precision Cut shouldn't be in here. This will be 2 of 2, so put both your points in there. Don't actually worry about one of these 2 I'm going to take out. One of these 2 is wrong. But yeah, so you'll end up with your chill there. You will drop your blades. You will get your spinning so that you get consistent hits on it, and it will home. Okay, on to Sync Strike, because this one does, like, the majority of the damage is going to come from the Sync Strike Shift interaction, which is also going to cause Shadow Cascade to proc. It's just a bunch of stuff going on that creates this just kind of synergy of awesome Shadow Dagger procs, and it starts with Sync Strike. So Sync Strike is going to be used at the target. You're going to aim at the target. Shadows are going to jump inward through perfect coordination. Those we're going to actually increase the number of shadows we have. Those shadows are going to jump in. They're also going to, each one's going to apply a Shadow Dagger when they hit the enemy. Larger enemies get hit even harder because they'll get hit by more of them. And then once we shift out, all of the shadows we create here will then use Shadow Cascade, and we'll use Umbral Blades to do even more Shadow Dagger procs. We're also going to get from this our Crimson Shroud. Crimson Shroud's great because it gives us 15% damage over time taken reduction if you have all 3 stacks, and we'll get all 3 every time we use this skill. So we're going to use it consistently, and we'll have up 15% damage over time reduction because of it. We're also going to shred armor, and there's a lot of armor that gets shred from this, even though it's not necessary for this build. We shred so much armor, it's stupid, but you do get a little extra here, which we needed to get just to get to the Shadow Daggers on hit, so it's a good little extra on the way. We're also going to want to get mana efficiency in this because it is pretty mana intensive, so we want to get the mana down as much as we can to make it easier to do that, and that pretty much covers Sync Strike. Shift is doing a number of things here. This tree might change slightly, might shift slightly, because we don't need shadow recuperation, and this has actually changed to CDR. You can see it in there. I had to have made the adjustment here, but I will make it. So we'll switch over to velocity, which will actually free up a little bit of space to get momentum quicker, which won't matter too much unless you're leveling with this, which if you are, that will matter. Same thing, elusive will be dropped a little bit because it has to be. It won't be 5 of 4 because that's not possible. But basically what we're going to do here is we have Lasting Presence, which is creating shadows when we shift, or 1 shadow, and then it's also causing a Shadow Cascade from you and from the shadow, which causes the shadow to be to expire, which also causes Umbral Blades to be created from expiring shadows. So that's how you get both Umbral Blades, and you're going to get Shadow Cascade, excuse me, off of Shift. Shadow Cascade, by the way, is right here. We're going to cover that in a second. So you're going to get both those off of Shift, but also remember, because we are Sync Striking first a lot of the time whenever we're actually up against big enemies, that's also going to cause all of those to use Shadow Cascade and expire and then drop Umbral Blades. And so you can, that's just how the crazy amount of effects just go together. So it all starts with a Sync Strike Shadow Cascade interaction here. That's not all that Shift is doing. Shift's also giving us a huge movement buff, 50% movement speed, 1.5 seconds, and we'll have the cooldown pretty low. It won't be as low as it used to be. They actually increased it by 5 seconds, but still low enough that we're going to have momentum a lot of the time. We're also going to gain a little bit of mana from it. Not a huge thing, but it's nice. It doesn't really make up for its own mana cost, but allows us to actually use it in a way that we gain more than we lose when we do it properly, because of some things that happen in Shadow Cascade. It's so hard to explain these things because they work so much together. Trying to talk about one without having talked about the other one already is such a challenging thing, but we'll get through it. We're going to get Shadow Slip as well, which is invulnerability while shifting, which means when you're moving through your shift, you just can't take damage. Is great. And then we'll be taking points in Elusive, which gives dodge rating per dexterity. It gives a ton, an absolute ton of dodge, and for that 1 second period, you'll be at basically 80% dodge rating, which is around the cap. So you'll be really, really hard to hit. We currently do also take 12% in kill threshold. I'll probably maintain that. I might in fact take out 1 point in Elusive and put it over here. And we're also going to get another point from not taking Shadow Recuperation, because we're going to take Velocity instead. So I'll probably disperse these points between Velocity and Consumed by Shout. Check the actual guide. When it's up live, it will have all the changes already in it, so you will know exactly what I did differently. But it'll be minor things that won't actually significantly affect the build, so nothing too scary to worry about. It's just check it to make sure you're doing it exactly that way, and you'll have the most optimal path. All right, next we have Shadow Cascade. Now this one is being procced by all the shadows from Shift and from from Synchronized Strike. And this is going to apply a lot of Shadow Daggers, but also help us regen our mana. So let's start with the Shadow Daggers section of it. So we're going to take Dagger Dance, and we're going to take Porcupine's Wrath, which is going to cause it to throw daggers, and only throw daggers, and doesn't do the melee version, but that's fine because we need to do that to get to Shadow Elegance, which is going to give us a Shadow Dagger chance from us, and then daggers, well, 100% Shadow Dagger chance from us, and then daggers will have 20%. There's so many of these that go out that it will actually do quite a number of procs, so it's quite good. It's better than it sounds on paper. So we'll get a lot of Shadow Daggers from that, and then we're going to use Onslaught and Fight in the Shadows to gain mana back when we use Sync Strike. This is really good, where Shadow Cascade, excuse me. This is really good when we Sync Strike Shift, because there's more shadows out, so we get more mana back. And this is a primary way that we regen our mana without using an actual generator. There's no generator in this build at all. It's just through mana regen on gear and through Fight in the Shadows and Onslaught. So that's a super important part to the build. You want to get that quickly. Then we finish up by taking Battle Trance, which just gets us over to Incapacitate, which allows us to apply 100% Frailty from Shadow Cascade. This will insta give all three. You're capped at all three frailties at once. So again, we don't need Frailty in our gear, which is awesome. It's just another open spot for gear that we can no longer have to worry about. The last thing we'll do is Smoke Bomb. This is just a nice, in fact, this is actually a big damage buff the way we do it here. You can make this more for defense if you go and take, for example, Shrouded in Darkness and Rapid Concealment, instead of something like Smoke Blades or Knives in the Dark or Swirling Fog. If you want to go that direction, you can. We don't need it. We really just don't need the defense, so why not get a lot of offense out of it? So that's what we're doing. So we're going to get Thick Smoke into Eroding Fumes, into Swirling Fog. This gives us a lot of armor shred. That's, again, not needed for the build, but it's going to allow us to get Knives in the Dark, which gives Shadow Dagger a chance on slow, and we get a lot of slows within even per second from this setup, because we have 100% slow frequency, so we've got 2 per second. So this is going to add a lot of Shadow Dagger procs just from that. Then we're going to take also Lingering Fumes, and Smoke Blades is going to give us melee and throwing attack damage each second for 4 seconds while we're inside Smoke Cloud. So that's up to 4 stacks. And this is both melee and throwing, so it affects all aspects of Shadow Daggers, because it's got both tags, so you can use both melee and throwing added damage. It's going to affect both. 200% increase melee and throwing damage just from this, so that's very strong. Next up we have, in fact, I think that's actually, yeah, I think that ends up being 250 or something like that. It's a crazy number. It's for a really good amount. I'm confusing myself over here. Okay, next up we're going to go to and this doesn't have to, it's a different order I have in here actually, because I'm just showing you offense first, and then this is the defensive side. So the defensive side here, we have Moonlight Bomb. That's really the only thing we're trying to get here, which gives us a Silver Shroud stack every time. Every build that uses Smoke Bomb should take this, because it's a free Silver Shroud. 2 stacks don't do you much good, but 1 does you a ton of good. So we'll take that, get a free dodge out of it, and that is Smoke Bomb. All right, let's move on to the passives, We've already spent almost 15 minutes just on the skill tree. That's how hard it is to, or the skills, that's how hard it is to explain that. The passive side, though, is a lot easier. So what we're going to take here, we'll start with evasion, which is a huge damage reduction buffer. We're trying to move constantly, and this is just another added benefit to that because it's 25% reduced damage taken while we're moving, and since we don't want to stop. By the way, Sync Strike is a movement skill, so even that we're not stopping when we're using it, and of course so is Shift. We're also going to take agility, which is going to give us a lot of damage, and haste on hit, very good for this build. Blood Dance is going to give us a lot of our melee leech, and then we can also get more melee leech from our gloves. We don't need throwing attack leech because these provide so much leech. It's enough right there. You've got your regeneration or sustain already taken care of just like that. Crit multi, we want to get as much as we can. All in is going to give us a ton of it. We definitely want that. Since Shadow Daggers always crits, it doesn't matter that this gets less damage for non-crits because we're never going to care about any non-crit that we do. Swift Assassin and Once are really good damage scalers. They're even better than they look because this can scale both throwing and melee. So this physical damage here is actually 2 damage per point for this build, and then Once is going to give you 2 throwing and 2 melee, so that's 4 per point. So that's just insane amounts of scaling on that. Pursuit is going to give us extra move speed. It does give us increased damage, that's good, but we really just want the 8% move speed to go as fast as possible. Focus Fire and Woundmaker are going to help us out with modifiers. So Focus Fire especially, the dodge rating debuff means we can take chance to dodge modifiers in the timelines, and it's not going to significantly harm our clear speed or damage. We'll have to, of course, apply a few before it really matters, but it will happen quickly. Woundmaker is not as strong as it used to be. Its crit vulnerability chance, or crit vulnerability chance is the same, but its maximum stacks is now only at 20%. Actually, I think it would be 50% on actual crit avoidance. So its crit avoidance is a little bit different than the crit chance it applies. Either way, this will help you take those. It might not help you as much as it used to. We still need to do some testing on that, but it still should be good, if not amazing. So you can take at least some crit avoidance, but you still aren't going to want to stack it since this can't get to 100% anymore. Perfection is a really, really good setup, especially with confidence and exuberance. Gives you a lot of armor, gives you a lot of dodge. And exuberance allows you to stack it a lot quicker. It also gives it damage, but the armor and the dodge are really the key parts of this. You get a lot more tankiness because of this. If you do play hardcore, you can invest in Death's Door. I believe that's over here at Death's Door, just to get some 1-shot, technically 2-shot protection. If you're not playing it, you don't need this, and it's a big investment that's probably not worth your time. But in case you are playing hardcore and you want all the defense you can get, Death's Door is an option. All right, let's talk about gameplay. Let's talk about the skill rotation. What we want to do is we want to be able to Sync Strike into an enemy and shift out as much as possible while getting our buffs up as much as possible. So we want to stay on the move and use Shift on cooldown. We use Sync Strike against tanky enemies in packs. Against things that aren't tanky, will probably just die from the shift interactions with Shadow Cascade and Umbral Blades. Make sure to use the skill directly on top of them for maximum Shadow Dagger stacks. And when you're in extended fights against enemies with dots, make sure to use it at least every 4 seconds to maintain Crimson Shroud stacks from Crimson Storm so that you take less damage over time. In extended fights, find a safe spot near enemies to cast Smoke Bomb. Try to stay in the smoke to gain damage from Smoke Blades. You'll also get a free Silver Shroud from doing that, so you can use it sort of strategically. When you think a big attack's gonna hit, you use it beforehand and you can dodge the attack. If the enemies become overwhelming, use a decoy to taunt them. By the way, I didn't mention the skill tree and skill thing, but we're gonna actually put decoy on our bar instead of probably Shadow Cascade, and you could be Umbral Blades too. Either one of those is gonna go on your bar. Okay. If mana is getting low, you shift a few times in a row before using Sync Strike and you'll get it back up. Shift regen your mana really quickly, plus your regen is actually pretty good, so that will help as well. All right, as far as mapping goes, we're going to run right to the objective. We're not going to stop unless it's like a rare, and then you're just going to Sync Strike right into the rare and shift out, and if you drop something good, if not, keep going. Everything else, we're just going to shift our way all the way to the end, and you'll kill most of it on the way, but it doesn't matter if you don't, because you're just trying to get to the objective as fast as possible, and you're going to get there very, very, very fast. If you shift near enemies, the Umbra Blades will actually hit them more easily, and that will clear them faster. So you can strategically like hold your shift maybe a second, and then as you get really close to an enemy, then you shift, then the Umbra Blades on them, and then that will kill them. Like I said, a Sync Strike on rare enemies, excuse me, along the way will one-shot them almost every time. Once you reach the objective, if it's a single enemy, like a mini-boss, cast Smoke Bomb, then continuously cycle between Sync Strike and Shift until they are dead. It will not take long at all. If it's a group, follow a similar strategy by using Smoke Bomb on cooldown near large groups or tanky enemies, then target enemies with your Sync Strike / Shift rotation. If you run low on mana, shift a few times in a row without using Sync Strike. If you start to feel overwhelmed at any point, use Decoy. Rinse and repeat. Pretty easy. Won't take you long at all to kill it. Bossing, use Smoke Bomb on cooldown as long as it's safe to do so. Remember, Smoke Bomb is not movement, so when you use Smoke Bomb, you're not moving, so you take more damage. So you definitely want to be careful when you do it, but you do want to use it as much as you can. It's a pretty quick cast. Sync Strike into the boss and then immediately shift away. Continuously do this as long as you have enough mana. If you're low on mana, shift a few times. Without using Sync Strike, get it back. Use Decoy in emergencies. Again, similar to the mapping rotation. Rinse and repeat. Bosses will die pretty quickly with this setup. All right, on to gear, blessings, and idols. So gearing for this build is pretty fun because it has so many different scaling things that actually feel impactful. The stat goals you want to cap resistances, you want to cap crit strike avoidance. Get 50 to 60% endurance, cap it if you can, but don't like over push to get it and lose out on other things. Just try to get as close as you can. 2,000 to 3,000 health is more than enough for this build. 30 to 40% dodge chance before your buffs. Once you put your buffs in, it's going to be insane, but before buffs will be really good. 1500 plus block effectiveness if you've got the shield. If you don't, ignore that. 1,000 plus armor pre-buffs. 50% armor shred chance or more. This is going to shred a lot very quickly, so you don't need a ton of armor shred to get a ton of armor shred, but you know, 50% or more is good, is ideal. 175 plus flat fizz damage. We're going to get this from a lot of sources. It's going to be pretty easy to get it. And it's going to make a huge difference. 100% plus physical penetration with Shadow Daggers. This is a prefix on helmet, body armor, and on idols and certain idols. 125% plus crit strike multi. That is on top of the 100% that you would normally have. So it'd be 225. 50 to 75% move speed pre-buffs, 80% increased mana regen, and 30 plus dexterity. As far as your starting gear goes, we're looking for health, of course, and resistances. You want to cap our resistances. Use something like antidote vial for poison resistance to make things easier. The same thing with a leather mask to get poison resistance. Just the more places you can take care of resistance easily, the better. You can use a shield, or you can go dual wield depending on how comfortable you are with taking a little bit of increased damage and not getting that extra benefit from shields. If you want to go safe, go shield. Otherwise, you can go double dagger and get more damage. If you have a bleeding heart, it makes it a lot easier for you to regen your mana, especially, or not your mana, to sustain your health with leech, especially if you don't have anything on your gloves yet as far as leech. If you do, it's, you know, you're good to go. If you haven't gotten the passives yet, which you probably should, pretty early, but if you haven't, these are two sources that can get you going pretty early. The nice thing about bleeding heart is it gives you leech for both throwing and melee, so it's additional. It's not a best in slot here, but it is good early on. Onto advanced, we are looking to get our Smoke Weaver going, and you can either dual wield still, or you can use a shield here. You're almost certainly not going to have Bastion of Honor yet. If you do, amazing, congratulations, you did really well. You got really lucky. We want a Siphon of Anguish. These are really easy to get LP on because they drop like candy from the Shade of Orbis. So put some throwing attack damage and minus throwing attack mana cost on if you can. That's really good. You can also put mana regen on it, but we really want the -3 throwing attack mana cost and +13 throwing damage if we can get that. That's our preferred. Wings of Argentus, if you farm this and get that, it's going to make things a little bit easier for you. It's going to have the haste on it, which isn't super necessary, but the 20% less damage while moving is awesome. Increased Shadow Dagger effect on your helmet is a really strong way of scaling it. So you definitely want to push that along with your increased health. Let's see here. Bone Amulet's really good for resistances as well. All right, on to endgame gear. At this point, hopefully you have a Bastion of Honor. If you don't, not a big deal though. Again, remember, you can still do a wield. You can do the entire thing. You don't actually need Bastion of Honor. It just gives you an extra layer of protection. But if you don't have, especially a double Smoke Weaver with the big dodge rating on it, it's going to be really, really hard to kill because it's going to be hard to hit you. So either way works. Try to get a 2 LP or more on your Siphon of Anguish by this point. You should be able to do that as well. As far as Exalteds, we're trying to push dodge rating on Amulet, really, really strong. Shadow Dagger effect on Helmet, of course, for the damage. It's a multiplier because we don't really hit any other penetration or shred. We're not going to run Fizz Shred on this. We don't need to. So it's really strong. Want a lot of health on our belt, of course. Mana regen is really important for this build. I should have mentioned this earlier too, but even earlier on, try to get mana regen going where you can. You got mana regen here, mana regen here, mana regen here. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to maintain the rotation. Mana regen everywhere pretty much I can get it. Realistically, I can't really get on the Siphon here, but that's okay because we've got it 4 places. So we're trying to get basically mana regen in 4 slots, and if we do that, we're looking pretty good. Let's see, anything else we need to talk about on Endgame here? Of course, movement speed. We always want movement speed. Shred on your gloves is great. Throwing damage on your gloves is really good too. It's another just really good scaler that it's new. We don't get a lot of throwing damage with this build. We don't need it, but that's a really good spot to put it. You can also put it on your belt as well instead of increased physical damage. In fact, I might even change that. It's probably better to have that there. As far as Bis gear, we are looking at very similar stuff, of course. Trying to get some legendaries is going to be pretty similar for the most part. Some big changes here are Lyricus Claws. If you can get these with throwing damage and hybrid health, then it's going to be amazing. If you can't get them with one or the other, it might not be worth your time. The plus throwing damage does quite a bit of damage, so it might not be better than one that doesn't have throwing damage. It's probably close, but I'm thinking personally, if I don't have at least throwing damage on it, I'm not making the change. And whether or not you're willing to remove the hybrid health or not is, you know, your choice. I wouldn't do that though. This is definitely a bis, super bis item. Like if you get a 2 LP and you get these 2, then this is definitely better. If you don't, it's kind of not entirely clear. Like you can get more damage out of it, or you can get the health and then you probably get more damage out of it, but you're giving up a lot to get these, so just bear that in mind. Definitely a bis item, and if you do get a 2 LP on this and you get these things on it, you just won the lottery. But don't stress about getting this. That's why it's under bis. Everything else, you're just putting up to tier 7. You're trying to get lots of good sealed stuff on here. Mana efficiency for Sync Strike is nice. It just gives you a little extra mana, but not necessary. That's why it's sealed. Extra dodge rating is always good. Armor on boots is really good. There you go. All right, let's move on to blessings. This is going to be a much longer video, I think, than some of the other ones. Are a little bit longer. Normal blessings don't matter as much. Don't worry too much about them. These are some good blessings that if you run across them, great. But if not, just keep pushing into empowered. You're going to replace them all anyway. Empowered blessings, Grand Echo Solarum, Grand Bastion of Divinity help you to take care of your resistances by giving you 2 capped resistance effectively if you roll high rolls. No, so we definitely want those. We also want our crit avoidance capped through Grand Survival of Might. That's a really, really strong one. And if we do have Bastion of Honor, we want Grand Bones of Eternity for block effectiveness. If we don't have that, you can run like increased armor or something there. But if you don't have that, you also want to go, regardless whether you have it or not, you want to pick up Grand Body of Obsidian for the large amount of armor that's going to give you. These actually need to be switched too. Those are both saying the same thing, but yeah, this actually would be endurance instead of armor, but I'll fix that one as well. As far as empowered drop rate blessings, we want to try to get our large shadow idols. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we're going to get the increased large idol drop rate from Grand Sight of the Outcast. Very strong. You can switch to idols once you have, or to uniques from Grand Winds of Fortune once you have all your idols, if you ever have them all. Otherwise, this is just a really good blessing to keep. Grand Subtlety of Slaughter and Grand Bindings of Sanctuary help you make uniques out of the, or excuse me, legendaries out of the uniques that you're looking for. Grand Memory of the Masters and Grand Hope of the Beginning can be skipped if you want to, but they do help you find Rogue increased Shadow Dagger effect shards, which once you get to Exalted won't matter, but before then maybe it'll help you out a little bit. But again, these can be skipped, they're not that important. As far as idols go, these are really important, both defense and offense. So if you're looking for offense, the large idol with increased Shadow Daggers effect is a very strong option. Stack this as much as you can until you're comfortable with your damage, and then you can switch to increased health, or just split them like this Get the 9% increased health. That's very, very powerful. As far as the suffix is, elemental resistance until you're capped, and then shattered armor effect is very good for this build as well, just to get you there quicker. The other idle slots will all be stouts. You can do increased health. If you do need resistances, you can do increased health resistance here, whatever resistance it is you need, and that'll be good too. These are going to mostly be to push your health when you can, but before then, absolutely use them to get your resistances sorted out. All right, that's it for the idols. Let's go on to build scaling and endgame, the last section. So for build scaling, flat melee throwing damage is amazing. 450% added damage effectiveness from Shadow Daggers is awesome, so we definitely want that. Again, Swift Assassin and Once, we talked about this earlier, really, really strong because they give you additional power over most other options because you have 2 tags on here. You have the melee and the throwing tag. Fizz Pen with Shadow Daggers is your big multiplier, so you definitely want to get this as much as you can. Helmet for sure, and then idols. You can wear it on your body armor, but eventually you're going to probably be replacing it with Wings of Argentis. If you somehow manage to get an LP on Wings of Argentis and get a tier 7 Shadow Daggers effect on it, congratulations, you have won the lottery and you now have a god build. Increased mana regen, you're going to need for Sync Strike, for the Sync Strike shift rotation, so try to get 4 of those at tier 5, and then you'll be good. Crit multi, we want as much crit multi as we can get. Lyrica's Claws, again, as Abyss, if you can fit it in there, but good luck. You're probably not going to do it for a long time, but if you can, awesome. That's our all-in's going to give you a lot of crit multi by itself. Chance to shred armor, try to get to 50% or more, and that should be enough to really cure you. You're going to get a ton of armor shred from this build. You'll be over 10k, and this is a Fizz build, so it benefits more from shred armor than any other damage type in the game. Dexterity is also great. It gives us damage and dodge rating, so we definitely want it where we can fit it. And then increased damage, we're going to get so much of that from passives and skills that we won't really need to fit it much in our gear. As far as recommended endgame activities go, there's not anything this build can't do. It is incredible at Monolith of Fate, just amazing at it. That's where its biggest strength is. If you're looking for one of the best Monolith of Fate farmers in the game and corruption pushers, you are looking at it now. Dungeons, it is good at it. It's very good at it. It is not the best at it. There are builds that are better, but it will do well for you for sure. You won't have any trouble with any of the bosses in particular, any more so than most builds would. So even the ones that you might struggle a little bit, you're going to struggle with, because there's some hard fights in there. As far as arena, it is good at arena. It is not amazing at arena, which is simply because, well, it's a melee build, so if you have to get really close to enemies, eventually they're just going to outscale you, and you're going to find yourself taking too much damage, and eventually you'll die. But it will push you for quite some time. You'll be able to go quite a ways in the arena with this build. So if you're looking for something kind of challenging melee style that can still do really well, this could be a good option for you. All right, that covers everything for the build guide. Do remember that there's a loot filter built in here as well, so pick that up, put it in your loot filter folder, and you'll be good to go to run this run this build. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great time in this build, a great time in Last Epoch, and I'll see you all again real soon.